do we start to do that, to bring, as Brad said, that sense of our own self and knowing really to flourish into the forefront of what we believe to be true for ourselves, and how to connect that vision of what we want with what we want around us in all our different roles. So with that, to boldly go where no man has gone before, I introduce to you Spock. No, I mean Nick.
God help me. Okay. Oh, so in a different costume, I do look a little bit like Patrick Stewart, just so you know. Right? We're going to go on a journey into the world of purpose. Now, what I'd like to say to you is as much as this theater is set up as a theater of entertainment, I am not here to entertain you. I'm here to engage you into stepping into purpose for each of you. How does that sound? I mean, really. I mean, I want you, as a result of what we do, to have such an epiphany and clarity of how purpose shows up inside of you that you no longer see it as something that somebody up there who's famous does that you can't do. How does that sound? Now, here's the challenge. If I do all the work, guess what happens? Not a damn thing for you. So we're going to have to work together. I'm going to have you really lean in. So are you in? Yes. Okay. That's a 9 a.m. on Sunday yes. So I'm going to up the ante. What I get to do for a living is I get to work with people around the world, from people who make ice cream, Ben & Jerry's, to people in special forces, to Swiss bankers, and I have to kick their ass into the world of purpose. And they usually, when they get there, they're like, oh my God, this is the best thing. And then they do amazing things in the world. I'm going to tell you some stories this morning. You'll be like, oh my God. But the truth of the matter is every one of those people are as simply struggling to figure out what to do next as each of you are. You know what I'm saying? But here's what I want to say to you. The opportunity today, and not just me, I think the colleagues that I have here, Betsy, who's going to do an amazing piece, Craig, he's talked about some of his pieces today, I can't wait to see it, and then Matthew, who's going to give us the Ben & Jerry's experience and adventure, has the possibility of you having an insight today, a deep insight, that 5 years from now you'll say, oh my God, who would have ever thought that that was the moment when I actually truly woke up to what really is possible, and this is what we've done. Now that's the invitation. So are you in? Yes. Okay, now notice the difference of how that feels versus the first yes. The first yes is the normal transactional yes. Yes? The second yes is, okay, you know, maybe the reason that I'm here, somebody's going to actually see it, and I'm going to see it, and we're going to go there. So that's the part of you I want you to have in today. Like, you ready? Yes. Okay. Now, last night, Jonathan, where are you? Okay, Jonathan, you did a great job of helping us really get the challenges of hoping the authorities are going to save us. Right? Those people that weren't in the room. Right? Truth is, if I look at this topic I'm talking about, why is it popular now? Well, the reality is when I grew up, as I was growing up, the truth is I had great faith in the authorities. I lived in a world in which I actually believed, and many people believe, that there was somebody who actually knew what to do, and if we just followed them, everything would be okay. You remember that? Okay, we believed that the US was a good place and we were going to save the world. We believed the Russians were all bad and there was good and bad, and we knew the right and the wrong, and we knew what we needed to do, and we had faith in it. Whether it was the civil rights movement or any of the other things that we chose to do. Martin Luther King, he didn't say, I have a plan, right? If he said, I have a plan, I mean, would anybody ever remember what he said? No. He said, I have a dream. Now, the truth is that that wasn't in the speech. What happened was purpose showed up through him, and he had to speak it. And when he spoke it, everybody got that something deeper was being born in that moment. You know, the 90s was a wonderful time of, we had Gorbachev, we had Reagan, we had Jack Welch, you could name them, and it was like all these people were, they had figured it out. We just needed to get lined up behind them and everything would be okay. How's it turned out? The last 15 years for me has really been challenging, like many of us. Look, the recession in 2002, we call it the Great Recession, but the truth is the pain that we had was personal. I had friends who were at Bear Stearns, and they just tell the story, and it's just like, it was so painful to hear what their experience was of losing everything, and then going to work the next day somewhere else and still feeling the loss, and then the happiness and confusion of having a job but just having lost everything. It's identity destroying. COVID. Gee, that was easy, right? I mean, I have such a Zoom headache. I was like, what is this thing? Zoom is so good, why does it hurt? And why do I have to drink so much wine at 6 o'clock in the evening? And I could drink the whole bottle in a way that in the past I would just drink one glass and I'm like, oh my God, I still couldn't get rid of the headache, right? And then people died. And then it became serious. Then I got sick. And it became extremely serious. I still have, post-COVID, I still can't breathe right. I still can't breathe right. Up here, it's even harder at the elevation. So yesterday, my wife is like, why are you breathing so hard? I says, well, you know why. My faith in the authorities has been tested. Climate change. We got AI, and we're watching everybody try to figure out what the heck we're going to do with this thing. Okay? We got Elon Musk, who doesn't care about any of it. So we live in a world where the authorities no longer seem to be a good option. Now, here's the interesting thing. I get to work with the authorities now. I now get to coach the CEOs of $50 billion business organizations all over the world. They actually ask me for my advice, which I find really interesting at times. One of my people I coach and advise is the head of leadership development and behavioral science for the US Army at West Point. And you know what I will tell you about all these people? They are just as scared as you and me, and they have just as much clarity as you and I do. The authorities do not know how to solve the problem anymore. Now, at the core of the word authorities, interesting enough, is the word author. And what that word means is we give our authorship to someone else hoping they're going to take care of us. In Jackson Hole, we can really be clear that that's not working. So in some sense, the real power of purpose is to take your authorship back. I spent the last 20 years working with Bill George, we created a movement on authentic leadership. Now, authentic leadership is about you discovering the unique gift you are and leading from that versus picking up the next book in the airport bookstore that says, here's the 5 things to be a great leader. Really? And the fact that it changes every 3 weeks, shouldn't that be some indication that it's probably not going to help you? Exactly. And what we were clear is that purpose was at the core of this. Purpose is at the core of the journey. Without it, you follow someone else's map. Now, I will tell you, for the first 38 years of my life, following other people's maps, I was really good at it, and I got all A's. Phi Beta Kappa, all that stuff. I really knew how to get an A. I became a consultant. I got to travel all over the world, and I got an A. I followed the map. I followed what everybody told me. If I did these things, I would be wildly successful until I was bankrupt. At the age of 38, my life fell apart. I got physically sick. My body stopped. I was burnt out. Adrenal failure, everything. I had been the Energizer Bunny, traveling all over the world, and it caught up to me, and I crashed. But it wasn't just a physical crash, it was a soul crash. It was every crash. And I'm sure as I'm sitting here, some of you guys are nodding, you know exactly what this feels like. I lost everything. I got fired. Actually, they just said, look, we like the Energizer Bunny, this one we don't want anymore. These people said they were family, they were not my family. My wife said, I really don't want to be with you anymore. We need to get divorced. So, getting divorced with a wife that's pregnant with your second child, who decides she doesn't want to be with you, that you have to pay money based on a salary you're no longer making, for which you're sick, and you don't know if you're ever going to get well again, makes it where any Jewish mother that's talking to you at some point just shuts up because she realizes none of her advice is going to help. The good news about being on the bottom is there's only one way to go. There's only one way to go. Yes? Only one way to go. For me, that's the only place purpose showed up, because I didn't need purpose up until then, because I was successful enough. So you don't need purpose when you're successful. Okay? It's just great. You just run with it. I mean, just people love you, people think you're great, everything's great, until it just all falls apart. It fell apart. The painful reality is I realized I was just a pretty arrogant, narcissistic jerk, which was really what was the case. And it basically caught up to me. I blamed everybody. The truth of the matter was that it was all my doing. It was created all by me. Because I didn't know what my purpose was. Really. Now, I discovered it in the bottom of the depths of that journey. I think somebody went into a whale at one point in the Bible to do this as well. But yeah, so that's the way it works, right? The Bible does have some of the good stories in it. I discovered that the deeper truth, as I dug for it, was what my real purpose is: to wake you up, wake myself up, and have myself really be home. Or to wake you up and to have you be home. And any time I'd done that in my life, where I brought myself home, I brought others home, was just the most magical thing. And everything else was just following someone else's map. But I wasn't supposed to follow somebody else's map. In some sense, my purpose said, we're going to rip out the floorboards because you aren't listening, and you're now going to really, really listen, and we're just going to kick it out of you until you have to listen dearly. We now teach programs virtually over 2 days that will help you figure out your purpose, and you don't have to go through any of these things. So that's the good news. Many thousands of people have done that, and it's like, okay, I've decided that my purpose in life is to make sure nobody else has to be as stupid and dumb as I am, and I'd have to work as hard to figure this out. Here's my big insight for all of us. Why is purpose important right now? The purpose is important right now in this world is because all the maps that we followed are broken. The map of Jackson Hole is completely broken. Jonathan, you did a great job of saying, this is the map and it's broken. It's totally broken. What does that mean? What that means is the only people who are going to lead from now on are the map makers. None of us have been trained to do that. We've all been following maps for a long time. And you know, for the most part, it's really comfy. It includes a cappuccino, right? When it's organically grown coffee and it's really smooth and all that stuff, and you get all kinds of weird milk things. It's like you can have almond milk, you can get all these things, right? You got Google Maps, everything, and it'll tell you, you can have it delivered to your house. But you know what? Who cares? It's just a map, but none of them are working. We live in a part of the world, you more than anyone else, and the map is broken. Whatever got you here is not going to help you get where you need to go. Someone here, some of you, have to become the map makers. Does anybody know who Stephen Leake is? Funny. He's the reason you have the elk refuge. He was the photographer around 1900, 1903, 1904, who photographed the elk and all the animals, the moose, as they were having a terrible winter. And he sent them to Rockefeller. He sent them to Roosevelt. And of course, Roosevelt looks at this and says, okay, we need to do something. Now, he gets all the credit, but the truth is this one person is the reason that Roosevelt actually knew about it. It only takes one person to wake up, right? So in some ways, that's the opportunity and that's the challenge. So in some ways, my journey of what I've gone through and the challenge that I've gone is to say purpose, for the most part, has its greatest value for us when things are broken. Things don't work. Because at some point, you have listened to all the other voices, and it's the only one that stays around and says, you might want to listen, because here I have something to say. So that's the invitation. Now, I'm sitting in a conference room. It's a global bank, one of the top 3 banks in the world. I'm sitting with this guy, Vince, who is a senior executive, and he's crying. Now, as you know, most bankers always cry, yes? No, is that the image you have of bankers? They're always crying, right? No, that's not the image any of us. When we go in for a loan and the bank and the person on the other side is crying, it's like, okay, there's a problem, right? It's like, oh shit, why is he crying? Now he's a very senior guy. This is a 70,000 person organization, okay? Most of the billionaires that have houses here bank with this bank. And he's crying. And the reason he's crying is that he spent the last 3 years creating this digital transformation of 10,000 people, and it was incredibly successful. And it was like the big release and event where it all happened 2 or 3 days ago. I'm like, what the hell's your problem? He says, well, the next day, the CEO announces that he's bringing in somebody as my co-lead who has all the same skills as me, and the word is that this person is just like burns people like left and right. This is my reward. I'm leaving. I quit. Here's my resignation letter. I'm leaving. I'm standing there looking at the victim, the 14-year-old boy who's crying. The good news is I have a secret weapon. I have his purpose. So I look at him, I look at Vin, I say, okay, Vin, I got that. So here's my question for you. Where's your purpose in all this? Now his purpose and the way he words it is, he said, my purpose, he said, is I'm the Tony Stark. Tony Stark is a character in Marvel movies, and he's Iron Man. He says, I'm the Tony Stark in the scene in the movie where I say, Avengers, it's time to work for a living. Now, what that purpose statements for individuals are like metaphors. For him, that's basically getting stuff done when everybody thinks it's not possible and just pulling it off and having it be unbelievably successful. He's one of those people where as everybody's running out of the room because the house is on fire, he runs in, puts the fire out and says, what is your problem? So I said to him, I pushed this on his face and said, well, where's that voice? I watched for 20 minutes as these two voices battled out to each other. Now, we all have the victim. Yes? A 14-year-old who's screaming and yelling that mom and dad will not take care of me. We all have this part. And that voice can be very loud. The only power that purpose has is to be as strong a voice as the others and for us to listen. And we have to choose it. So at the end of 20 minutes, he chooses the purpose part. And he says, okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to say to the CEO, I'm really pissed. This is not how we want to be celebrating what we've achieved. But given you've brought this person in, instead of us rolling this out to the next 10,000, let's do it for the next 30,000, and then I need a co-lead, and we can go kick some ass and get some shit done. And the CEO looks at him and says, got it, I'll get you the budget, let's do this thing. Now, way different outcome. He also was in charge of the Ukrainian crisis response, where they had to pull everything they had out of Russia. It went from 12 people to 120. It was once a day, and it became the most entertaining, powerful expression of leadership and purpose during a crisis. And he got a national award for it because he was Avengers, it's time to go work for a living. And he was calling everybody to that place that they had to truly lead. And it was just so incredible. That's what purpose does. Next story. Can you imagine if you're in an organization in which it has 1.1 million employees and you want to change a fundamental part of it? I don't know. I think that's much more challenging than anything you guys are facing here. Would you like to know what it is? Which organization? It's the U.S. Armed Forces. Andrea Peters is, at the time, a lieutenant colonel. Today, she's a colonel and she's a battalion commander in the U.S. Army. I'm so proud of her. I am so proud of her. She was a woman of color. Her father was a non-commissioned officer who's still alive. And his name was Pete, which was a nickname, and so she's referred to as Pete, which is the funniest thing. You're like, okay, Pete? Okay, whatever. Okay, her purpose is to help those without a voice truly have a voice and close the gap. Very interesting for a black woman in the U.S. Army. Turns out there's 16% of the U.S. military are women, so 16% of 1.1 million, do the math, is 176,000. Now, she uses that reference as 1776. What happened in 1776? Right? She decided that the biggest challenge that women have in the US military is they have to dress like a man. They have to give up anything that's feminine completely. The dress code is extremely rigid. There is no fingernails, no cosmetics, there are no earrings, there's no hair, there's no nothing. You have to take it and get rid of all of it and be in it all the time, and then you can be in the US military. And she realized that that was not okay. Now, this is one person. And she decides to go up against the board and change code 670-1, which was basically what you can wear every day as a woman. And she went up and she battled it and she lost, she battled it and she lost. And then George Floyd shows up. And she said, you know, we had done all the work for 5 years, 10 years, so the point is that I knew I had them. And she walked in and she says, you're going to do this. And they did. One person changed what it is that women get to be as their identity in the US military forever. One person did this. The reason is, what's interesting is it wasn't her day job. It had nothing to do with her day job. Okay, this is because her purpose wouldn't let her not do it. So it's an example. You know, the challenge about purpose is it isn't about making your life happy. Being happy is about being happy. Being purposeful is going to get people, is that you know you're living your purpose when people have knives out and they're upset because you're breaking their maps apart. You're creating a new map, and the only way you create a new map is you make room by making sure that the old maps don't work anymore. Well, if they're not working, it's a lot easier. For the US military, for her, the reality is it wasn't working for women. She went and talked with many, many women and got to the point where the voice of all of them was so clear, and it was the voice that no one was listening to, that she had to speak. Purpose will have us do things that are not comfortable. If it's easy, it's not purpose. Okay? Now I get to talk to you about Jackson Hole. Having been here for the last 3 or 4 days, I'm stunned with the experience of what it is to be in this place. I looked at, Jonathan, the work that you did and how much people love this place. There is a purpose here that is very present. The Teton Education Center, I think it is, the group that took us on the journey. We went on a safari a couple days ago, and there's a gentleman named Dave Hawk, I think is his name, David Hawk. Okay, much helpful. Thank you, Teton Science School. Okay. There's a point where we said, okay, everybody be quiet. Just tell me what you hear. You couldn't hear anything. You heard the water. What we all said was, we all live in places where there's lots of noise. But what he was asking us for was something different. He was saying, are you really listening? You see, I think the challenge, and my challenge for all of you is are you really listening? When I look at Stephen Leake, when I look at Olaf and Mandy Murray, they really, really listened in a way that they changed what it is that you get to experience. But I'm challenging you in saying that based on the feedback I saw from Jonathan is I don't think you're all really, really listening. If you listen to the rocks and you listen to the water and you listen to this land, it's very clear what his purpose is. And the question is are you really listening? Because if you're really listening, you have to do what my friend Andrea says, is that you have to do the hard right over the easy wrong and to not go for the half-truth when the full truth could be won. And it's hard, but you got to really show up. So in some sense, that's the invitation, and that's the opportunity. Now, I work with a company that everybody loves. So how many of you have kids between the age of 5 and 15? Okay, what is your relationship to Lego? What is your relationship to YouTube? No. What is your relationship to computer games? Interesting, Lego has a very different response, yeah? So here's the journey. Lego's journey and this place we're in right now has some really interesting parallels. Lego, for And I've worked with them for 15 years. So for 2006 to 2016, they had the best growth of any capitalistic company in the world. 20% growth every year. How many of you are in business would like to have 20% growth every year? I mean, that would just be unbelievable, yes? They went from the same size as Hasbro and Mattel to twice as big as both of them. Okay? Barbie doesn't even come close. Now, what's interesting is that in 2000, their purpose is to help create and imagine the builders of tomorrow. To imagine and create, inspire the builders of tomorrow. That's a really cool purpose, yeah? The other two don't really have a purpose. So with that, they created a map that nobody ever created before and made this amazing thing. And the problem they had is that they forgot the purpose. The problem with success is that you get focused on what they did is they ended up focusing on not screwing up. Sound familiar? Right, let's do next year what we did last year because we don't want to screw up, right? We've all been there. And the truth is that in 16 and 17, they dropped 40%. Sales dropped 40%. Now you have to really work hard to drop 40% in 1 year, in 6 months. You have to be really good at it to get it to go down that much. So they didn't see that Toys R Us was going bankrupt. The rest of us, it was pretty damn obvious. They were shocked when it happened. I'm like, how could you be shocked about this? They were shocked when Amazon came up. I'm like, what are you talking about? They'd put all their money in marketing on Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network, and nobody was watching it anymore. They had all gone to YouTube. I'm like, hello? Well, the problem was they got focused internally on themselves, on who was getting a job and who was fighting with who and all those things, and they forgot about the purpose. There was no purpose. They followed a map that no longer worked. It blew up in their face. Look, they had to lay off 1 of 4 people, and most of those people were going to school with your kids, and you had to lay them off. That is brutally painful. Welcome to the real world. So the reality is what we just found is that they woke up, they realized they hadn't been living their purpose. They stepped into the purpose once again of how do we inspire and create the builders of tomorrow? And they sat down with Amazon and said, how do we do this together? They came up with a set of principles. Every product has to fit the Lego values of fun, curiosity, and inspiration. Hands-on, minds-on, and social. It has to include your parents. Oh my God, your parents get to play with you. What did you do during COVID when you had your kids and you had to do Zoom? Did you give them, what was it, Legos, YouTube, or some computer game that you want them to play with, right? So Lego has a different relationship with all of us. So in some ways, purpose really matters. Now, how does this relate to all of you? Is I think where Jackson Hole is right now is, I think Toys R Us just went bankrupt. The question is, what are we going to do about it? So in some sense, the opportunity for you is to listen into the purpose of this place and ask the question, how can I serve? That's the opportunity. Now, there's a question I want us to play with. I've done some talking, but reality is what I want us to play with is this question. What's the question that really matters to you about purpose, the one that you don't have the answer to? And I want you to just take a couple of minutes and think about it, because what I really want to do is take a couple of minutes and talk about what's really important to you about this topic, not what I've been sharing. So take a couple of minutes, share with someone next to you, how would you answer this question? What's the question that you really have that you'd like to have the answer to? So go for it. You're gonna. I should have started with this. Okay, let's see what questions you have, and we can have a dialogue around it. Gary, do you have the box? Got the box. Okay, so who's got a question they'd like to put out in the room? What's the question that you have about purpose that's really important to you that you don't have the answer?
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello, hello. Hi.
Hey.
Thank you. This is so inspiring. My question is, I have a lot of questions about purpose, but let's start with, why do you find people are living not in alignment with their purpose?
Okay, so here's the good news. The good news is that most of you are living your purpose. The question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much? Most of you are probably at about a 5. There's times when you really are living your purpose. If we look through your life, we'll see times where you really were living your purpose. The question is relative to the challenges of the world we live in, what would happen if we were, instead of at a 5, we were at an 8 or a 9? So how do you truly own it, as opposed to sometimes it happens to come through? Right? What would it be like to do it all the time as opposed to just some of the time? That's the opportunity. See what I'm saying? And I think that for all of us, it's not like I'm going to, I don't go around the world helping people I don't give them purpose. I just help them remember and re-access and go, oh my God, it's always been here. What was I thinking? See what I'm saying? For all the people I was describing, the clarity of having their purpose allowed them to take on really big things that otherwise they would have run away from. But they would have still been living their purpose at the normal level. But the world's requiring something different from us. Yeah? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm still curious. So what's your opinion on why we're not living at an 8 or a 10?
I think the truth of the matter is that it really requires a level of awareness and conscious focus that none of us have been trained to have. Look, I had to have everything ripped away before I actually started to find the thing. I mean, I don't think anybody should have to go through that. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, at this point, we can get it down to a couple of days and everybody goes, oh my God, now I know. So in some ways, like anything else, it requires a ritual and a ceremony that helps us to own it. It's sacred for each of us. It's your soul contract. Do you know what your soul contract is? At some level, your parents could say, well, here's the difference between you and your brothers and sisters. Okay, that's interesting, but that's not who we want to hear it from. You know what I'm saying? We want to hear it from inside of us. We want to be able to word it ourselves. Yeah. Who else? Next question back here. If you guys have questions up there, we'll see how we throw the ball upstairs. Gary said he can jump. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I have two questions. One is, well, I think many of us can often feel glimmers of our purpose.
Yeah.
How can we actually pin it and identify it? And two, is it static?
Two sides of that. So one is that we're going to do an exercise in a couple of minutes with some help from some friends to help you deepen your connection to your purpose. Okay? My experience of purpose is you're never done. Every day I wake up and go, I was asleep yesterday. What was I thinking? And each day I'm deeper and deeper and fuller. And purpose isn't an outcome or a goal. It's a journey of continuing to reveal the deeper expression of what is it saying to you. It's listening to that voice that is always there for you. It will never forsake you, but you will forsake it, and then you'll remember it, and you'll step back into it again. Okay? And you keep coming back to it. You all showed up here for a reason, and you get this, which means that some part of you is ready to go deeper into this conversation. You see what I'm saying? So I don't think there's a place to get to as much as it's about being in the question of deepening what it means. And you pick up a book and you read it, and all of a sudden it's saying something to you, and you go, oh my God, that's the thing I needed to get. Okay? So there's a little bit of a mystery to it, because if it wasn't a little mysterious, it wouldn't be worth finding and having. Do you know what I'm saying? And you've got to find it. See that smile on your face? That's what purpose feels like when you get it. It's that moment where you go, oh. Yeah? Okay, who else? Other questions? Over here?
All right. So what if the work that I do for a living and my purpose are contradictory inherently?
Okay, how many of you have this dilemma? What the hell am I doing? I was like, oh my God. You know,
Work? Do I have to quit my job?
you have to come work for me, because I just do purpose work, and it's just like directly, it's like it's a direct line feed. You know, just, oh, it's got some purpose. Okay.
Do I make small changes within my career or within my company?
Great question. Now, here's the thing. Much of our identity in our life is defined by what we do, who we are, where we are in the community, all those things, what we wear, what kind of car we drive, all that stuff, right? None of that matters. The beautiful thing about purpose is it works no matter where you are, no matter what you do. It's about how you do it. It's about what happens when you show up and make the cup of coffee versus someone else. What do you bring to making that cup of coffee that no one else brings? Okay? Now, when Howard Schultz went to Milan and he sat in this coffee shop and the barista was doing the barista thing, and it was all these Italians, they were sitting there, they were sat there every morning and they greeted each other. He was like, oh my God, I want to bottle this and have this be what we bring. He got the coffee, he got the store, I don't know if he got the barista, because that barista will never exist again. So in some sense, the gift and the invitation of purpose is, yes, I know the job. At the same time, how do you have purpose when you take out the trash is the real axis of when you know you're living your purpose. When you can have purpose when you take out the trash, it's not dependent upon that. Purpose is not dependent upon the outside world. If you're dependent upon the outside world to live your purpose, you will have a hard time, because somebody's going to have to give it to you and somebody's going to take it away. And that ain't a great place to be. Versus nobody can take it away, nobody can give it to me. I always had it, and how do I bring it to this context? Not to say that what you're doing for a living is the right choice. Right? Does that make sense as I'm saying this? Okay. I mean, everybody wants purpose to solve everything. No, purpose kicks your ass. Purpose is really pissing me off all the time. Going, here's what you need to do. I'm like, shit. Next question. Who's got a question? Right back here. Okay.
Lots of hands.
Lots
Thank
of
you.
hands.
So, I don't know, I so often find myself coming back to this cultural question, right? Like, part of me wonders if our loss of purpose is coming from an evolving society, right? As you described, from that sort of authority, the trust in authority,
Yep.
we're shifting. So my question to you is, when you travel and you've worked with groups all over, do you see cultural differences in this loss of purpose, or this, this need to find it, or, to gather it from the outside versus the inside?
Once again, I think for most of our parents, they didn't need purpose. They worked in the job, they stayed in it, they retired at 65, they traveled, and they had a good life. I mean, you just didn't need it. Or you were in World War II and you didn't have to worry about purpose. It was like either, one side was going to win, one side was going to lose. Purpose was really clear. I think we're now in a time where we've been asked to all choose and be the authors of our own journey, and it's really one that no one in history, none of us in history has ever had that much choice. Look, in the past, if you were a shoemaker, then your kids were going to be shoemakers. If you were a blacksmith, your kids would be blacksmiths, and that would just be the way it would be forever. And it never changed, right? At this point, we say to our kids, what would you like to do? Okay. How do you choose? So in some sense, purpose becomes so much more important when the authorities are no longer around. And you have to choose. And you say to somebody who's 22, 25, choose something that's going to have a huge impact on your life, and if you get it wrong, you're really going to be screwed. I'm telling you, that makes life really interesting. And I've got 3 or 4 of them in the 20s, and it's like, ooh, this is good. So once again, I think purpose is now, Marcus Aurelius, 2,000 years ago, Emperor of Rome, said, most people work hard all their lives and are wasting them because they have no purpose. Jesus, this is 2,000 years ago he had this figured out, right? Why is it all of a sudden now? Well, because now we have to choose. A friend of mine teaches at Harvard Business School. He says the biggest challenge for all the students is up until getting into school, everything was clear. Now they have all the choices, and they're traumatized because they somehow feel like the choice they make is going to determine whether all the money they spent and time was worth it or not. And they're just like, it's like post-traumatic stress times 10. So, next question.
How can we all incite purpose in those who aren't seeking it, from either electeds or people like a very wise, capable friend I invited to this event? She said, I'm not a leader. Why would I come?
Yeah, okay. Great question. But my sense is probably the best way to help you with that is the piece we're going to do now. Okay? I want to move to the next piece because I think what I've done is I've made you really hungry to eat the meal. Yes? You're like, this is great. You keep showing me this great menu, but when do I get to eat this thing? Right? This looks like a great appetizer called purpose. Okay, let's try some. Would you like to try some now? Okay. So, I'm not going to help you figure out your purpose statement right this second. I want you to access the place that purpose actually shows up inside of you. Okay? And help you start to own that part of you you have to own if you're going to really step up. This is at the level of any of the people that have transformed this valley over the last 100 years. This is what they had. So, purpose is that unique gift that you bring to the world. It's what you see that no one else sees, and they have the same job as you, but you see something and it matters to you, and you can't figure out why it doesn't to anybody else. That's purpose. If everybody agrees with you, you don't need purpose. Right? This is the question we all have to sit with. What is the 1 or 2 things only you can do? Now, what do I mean by that? You're a coach, you're a barista, you're a teacher, you sell hats, You sell cider. The question then becomes is, anybody can do it, but what is it that you bring to it that no one else brings to it? What is it that for you, in your heart, is what your expression is, that if you do it, it changes your relationship to it? It changes everybody else's relationship to you, because they say, whenever Mandy shows up, oh my God, here's what happens. That's what we want to get our hands around. Okay? What is the one or two things only you can do? Now, I'm not talking like, going to Mars. Elon Musk has already taken that one. Okay, it's the little simple things. Some people, there's a way in which they will smile and they give you the cup of coffee where you feel like you've been blessed. And other people, it's the cup of coffee and you're like, okay, there's nobody, all there is a cup of coffee. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Next question. What is it in your current adventure that really excites and scares you? I promise you, if it doesn't both excite and scare you, there's no purpose required. If it just excites you, it's called a vacation. Scared means there's a risk that shit's not going to work out. So you better figure this out, because if you don't really show up, it is not happening. And it's bigger than you would ever be. So you're going to have to get much bigger than you have been. You have to really show up. This is like time to show up. This is Avengers, it's time to go work for a living moment, yes? Now, we're going to go on a journey, and I have two colleagues who are going to join me. Carly, Andrew, come on up. Because I've been torturing them for the last 3 or 4 days. Okay, I've been pushing them and prodding them around these questions. Now, what I'm going to be asking you to do is, as we're talking, I want you to be thinking about what your answer is to these questions. And the last one's really important. What do you need to do less of to create the time to make it happen? Andrea Peters had to figure out, having a full-time job in the US military, how to change the whole system.